I have to say something else. The person that I'm going to introduce, I consider to be a great friend. A friend of the Tea Party and a friend of our nation. Over the last 3 years, any of you who've watched Fox News have seen this individual. And this individual has cut through all of the bullshit that we hear from all the other political pundits. He brings clarity to the picture, he brings hope to the picture, and he brings an understanding of how this process works. From my standpoint, he has been the best friend of the Tea Party.
Yeah.
From the very beginning, when people thought that, who are these people, these radicals out there that are promoting these conservative whatevers, Dick Morris was the one person who stood up and explained to people exactly what we stood for and exactly the importance of our movement. And since that day, he continues to support us. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce a real friend to any conservative, Dick Morris.
So I have to give Mark some advice about going to Washington. When you get there, don't drink the water. It's polluted. There's something in it that makes you want to spend money and that makes you liberal. Now you know what to do when water is polluted, don't you? You boil it to get rid of the impurities. And then you toss in a tea bag. There are really two types of Republicans in Washington. There are the pros and there are the Tea Party advocates. And their identifiable fault line that runs down the middle of them. And the pros, out of the 250-odd Republicans in the House, have about 150 of them. And the believers have about 100 of them. And that's roughly the fault line that you saw, a little bit worse, but pretty much the fault line you saw when Obama palmed us off with this continuing resolution so that we didn't shut down the government. And instead of saving $100 billion in the first year, which they promised, which prorated to $62 billion because there was only 8 months left of the fiscal year, and it ended up at $20 billion. And then it turned out that it actually cost us money. And there were about 70 or 80 hardy souls who defied Boehner and defied the leadership of the House of Representatives. And stood up for their own campaign promises. And they lost, but they raised so much hell that when the debt limit vote came up, 3 months or 4 months later, it wasn't perfect, but we got about $2 trillion of real cuts. And we did the first time in history that the federal budget for the coming year was fewer dollars, not inflation adjusted, fewer dollars than the one for the previous year, including entitlements, including stuff that we couldn't control through Congress. And that was because the Tea Party caucus in Congress had acquired the intellectual mastery of the body. And more importantly, they scared the daylights out of Cantor and Boehner. It is very important that the Republican Party run the House. It is very important that they win the Senate. But it is just as important that the conservatives control those caucuses. Because we're not running only against Barack Obama's Congress. We're not only running against Nancy Pelosi's Congress. We're we're running against the Congress that we had in power in 2000 to 2006. The Republican Congress that added $4 trillion to the national debt. That took a balanced budget, and I hate to rub it in, guys, that my boss left and turned it into a $400 billion deficit. Then Obama one-upped him and made it 1.5 trillion. But really, we are running against that Congress of earmarks, that Congress of increased spending. You know, if they proposed to burn down the United States Capitol, those congressmen would say, phase it in over 5 years. And that's the mentality we have to stop here. That's what we need to change. Now, as it happens, not only is Mark a candidate who really will stand up for that, because he's not a pro, he's not owned by the leadership, he's not like some monkey climbing up a tree looking for the next branch to hang on to. He's a businessman who entered politics because government didn't leave him any choice with the policies that it adopted. And I know the Tea Party caucus in Washington. I've spoken before them 5 or 6 times, and you will fit right in.
Yeah.